We know the grid is undergoing massive change, which creates massive opportunities for local energy. The Energy Changemakers podcast offers rich conversations with industry leaders to help you and your company capture opportunities to build a decentralized grid. I'm your host, Elisa Wood. Welcome to the Energy Changemakers podcast. Hey, Elisa Wood here from Energy Changemakers. So, it turns out that solar power could be a lot cheaper if we just got rid of some of the crazy red tape that households and businesses face. Other countries have figured this out. It's about time we did too. My guest today, Nick Josefowitz, the CEO of Permit Power, has an idea about how to make that happen. Enjoy the conversation. Hey, Nick, how are you today?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. It's nice and sunny here in California, and I'm always happy when it's sunny.
Aren't we all? Sunny here too, but way too cold in Virginia. Thank you so much again for being here today. I do appreciate it. I've been hearing about Permit Power for quite a while now, but you really caught my attention with your recent report. Let me tell our audience some of the reasons that report caught my attention. Here's a few statistics from it. When it comes to solar, the soft costs make up an astonishing 78% of installing rooftop solar. 78%. That's a huge number. And it seems like almost an impossible number. And what can we do about that? That's a lot. It's been fixed in other places. In Australia, a 7 kilowatt solar system cost $4,000. That's the price tag. While in the US, largely because of these soft costs, it costs $28,000. So when I saw this, I just had to have Nick on this show to find out where these figures came from, what they were working on, and what they want to do. So thank you so much again, Nick, for being here. So let's just start off. Let's tell our audience a little bit about who Permit Power is.
So we're a nonprofit advocacy organization, and we have a mission to make it cheaper and easier for Americans to power their lives. And we do that by trying to cut the red tape that makes home solar and batteries so much more expensive in this country, as you said, than in peer countries around the world. And so we do a lot of state level advocacy. We do a lot of research, policy research, as well as the type of research you were mentioning that we just put out about why rooftop solar and batteries are so expensive in this country and what we can do to make them cheaper.
And what are soft costs?
The two different types of costs are hard costs and soft costs. Hard costs are things like panels, inverters, mounting, basically the hardware. And soft costs is basically everything else. You could think about it as sort of paperwork and panels. Labor is also part of the soft costs, but that's a very small part of it. So you're talking about things like permitting, interconnection, customer service, sales, marketing, overhead, that type of thing.
So we have panels or the hard costs on the one hand, and then we have on the other hand, all these other sort of things we have to do in order to get that panel installed. So tell me about what among these soft costs you see as the most likely that we could reduce to get costs down.
We really think that red tape, and particularly permitting, interconnection, in some cases homeowners associations approvals, we think that that red tape is the foundation for why soft costs are so high in this country. And just in comparison, in Australia, the vast majority of the cost of an Australian home solar and battery system, as an example, is the hard costs. The soft costs are a lot smaller. And so they're the direct costs associated with having to go drive, in many cases, to a planning office of a city or a county, stand in line, submit the permit application that you needed to print out on a special size sheet of paper in triplicate and have stamped by an engineer. That type of direct costs. But there's also then the impact, the indirect costs that all this red tape has on other soft costs. So for instance, it takes so long to get a permit, to get interconnected in much of the United States, that between 20 and 30% of customers who bought a home solar system will cancel their order before it gets installed. And
Wow.
the evidence is super clear that the longer they have to wait, the more likely they are to cancel.
So they start to have second thoughts about the investment, basically?
Yeah, I mean, it's a significant investment
Mhm.
and things come up. They decide they want to go take a Thanksgiving break to Hawaii. They have an unexpected medical expense. They get a job somewhere else. They decide they want to move, whatever it is.
Or maybe they just get frustrated, right? I'm thinking of the late night comedian Bill Maher. I remember he, a couple of years ago, kept reporting on his show how long it was taking for him to get his solar panels activated. And I remember thinking, "Uh-oh, is he ever gonna just give up?"
Totally. And people get super frustrated, and people's satisfaction with the process is documented to go down the longer it takes for them to get their solar panels installed and up and running. And that obviously makes sense. And so installers need to then set up a whole customer service team to manage people during that process. Then often by the time they've come to the end of that permitting and interconnection process, they might have some different panels in stock or different inverters than they had originally permitted the system for. So they have to go through a redesign. Then all the money that they spent acquiring the customers that drop out has to be paid for by the customers that don't. And on and on and on and on. And so you have this phenomenon where the complexity and the delays that come from the broken permitting and interconnection processes and sometimes homeowner association approval processes are really generating an enormous amount of additional cost for everybody and putting home solar and batteries out of reach of far too many American families.
And that translates directly into the number of people who are actually installing solar, right? I remember seeing some figures you had about the difference between the number of households in Australia that have rooftop solar versus the number in the US. What were those?
Yeah, it's pretty stark. So in Australia, 33% of families have rooftop solar. In the US, it's well below 10%. And what's incredible is we think about Australia as this very sunny place, but that's the deserts in the middle of the country where nobody lives. If you actually look where people live in Australia around the edges of the continent, those places are not really much sunnier than the places where the average American lives. Denver
Yes.
is significantly sunnier than Melbourne, for instance. And
Wow.
so you can't really think about this as though Australia is just the sort of sunniest place on earth. From a home solar perspective, it's not. And the sort of the things that we talk about in the report about the impact that we would have on American families if we could get solar prices down to the level that you see in Australia, but it's not even Australia or Germany, the UK, where I grew up, or other countries, are really substantial. If you could get those home solar and battery prices down to what you see in peer countries, there would be almost 20 million more families installing solar. And together they would save over $1 trillion across the life of their systems. I mean, those are just really big numbers. And it's a shame that because of all these broken processes, American families can't have the cheap, nice things that families in other countries have.
And your timing in bringing this message to US policymakers is really interesting and important. When we first spoke a few weeks back, I remember bringing up that point and pointing out that we had lost the federal incentives. So it's making solar installations more expensive for households. But now, a few weeks later, we just came out of an election where it seems like the overriding message we're hearing over and over again is that affordability is what the US public is now concerned about. So I would say that your timeliness has doubled.
Yeah, I think people are really frustrated with how much they're having to pay for on their electricity bills. Electricity bills have been rising faster than inflation, and 1 in 7 Americans struggle to pay their electricity bills to the extent that they're having to make trade-offs between paying their electricity bills and paying for other basic necessities. And it's not like the quality of their electricity has gotten better. They're just paying more for what seems like the same thing. And in some cases, actually, reliability has gone down. And I think that home solar and batteries provide this incredible opportunity if we can make them cheap enough to be a solution that American families can deploy really fast to bring down their utility bills really significantly and really instantly. You put solar on your roof and your next utility bill is going to be lower. It's one of those interventions which we really need to embrace right now. And the way that I think we need to make it more accessible for more American families is by making it cheaper, permitting, streamlining interconnection, getting rid of that red tape. And the nice thing about it is that getting rid of that red tape doesn't actually really cost anything. And from a government perspective, you can, for free, make it a lot cheaper for your residents to save money on their utility bills. And I think that's why we're seeing this kind of agenda have a little bit of a moment.
Yeah, I think that's really true. I actually wrote a blog a couple of weeks ago, and the headline was something like Why Solar is Both Expensive and Cheap. And I think that there's been for years a notion out there that solar is expensive because it is to install. But I think there's not always a clear message that once it's installed, it makes your electricity a lot cheaper. And that just seems to be really key now as power, as you point out, power becomes more and more expensive. But let's talk a little bit about how to go about doing this. So you've identified the problem really clearly. Now, how do you make this change? How do you get these soft costs down? It seems to me it's hard because a lot of the change has to be done at the local level, right? It's cities, it's states, it's even utility policy that's causing these problems. So, how do we go about making this change?
So there are 20,000 local governments in the United States, counties, cities, towns, that are issuing permits for home solar and batteries. There's 3,000 utilities. So going one by one is just not a way to scale these solutions. And also, you might streamline one particular town's process or one utility's process, but you're not going to be able to have some standardization between the local governments, between the utilities that could really unlock even more benefits, reduce even more complexity. But the good news is local governments, utilities, homeowners associations, they are all sort of creatures of states to a certain extent. The states have the ability to set minimum standards to make sure that they're providing top quality services to their residents, protect their residents against overreach. And so what we do is we really focus at the state level. And there's obviously 50 states, but we just focus on 14 of them because 14 states represent the vast majority of the potential home solar and battery market. And we think if we can move them, we'll have an enormous impact and it will be a model for other states to do that. And so the type of legislation that we have run, for instance, the good example is in Maryland, where we have helped pass legislation that would require all local governments in Maryland to automate their permitting for rooftop solar and home batteries. In New Jersey, we also helped pass legislation slightly different, but pretty similar, that would require the state to set up an automated permitting process.
And tell us what an automated permitting process is. Tell us what that means.
So this is basically how government should work. So the way it works now in a non-automated world is that you have to print out paper, walk into the permitting office, stand in line, hand over the paper, then you don't know when it's going to come back to get your permit. Automated permitting is there's an online platform. You put the information about your solar system into the online platform. The software, in an automated way, checks to make sure that your solar system meets building codes and then instantly issues you your permit. And so you can start work on the system the next day.
So we're talking
And
about basically bringing these systems up to 2025.
exactly. I mean, we found that there's some cities that still require forms to be filled out by hand with the carbon paper on the
I didn't
back,
know that
which is,
existed anymore. Wow.
I'm sure a lot of your listeners don't even know what carbon paper is. I mean, I've never had to use it in my life, and I'm well into middle age. And so it's really, some of the stuff is really archaic. I mean, it belongs more in a museum than it does in a local government process. And it's actually really exciting because you now have over 300 local governments in 17 different states that have implemented automated permitting. I just did some math on it before I came on today. And back of the envelope, we estimate that automated permitting has already saved over 1 million days of delays
Wow.
for American families looking to install rooftop solar, which is, I think, a pretty
Mm,
cool number. But we're just getting started. And I think the other thing that's really exciting about automated permitting is that it's saving homeowners money and saving homeowners time. It's saving the small businesses that are solar installers around the country money and time. And it's also saving the local governments time. And Brown University Climate Solutions Lab put out a bunch of reports on a state by state basis showing that it could save thousands of years of local government staff time. But
wow.
if local governments automated their permitting, and local governments are not flush with cash right now, they're struggling to hire people into their building departments because there's, like with a lot of jobs, there's not a great pipeline for people looking to go into building inspection. There's a shortage of building inspectors around the country. So it feels also like we're doing a really good thing across the board here, not just for families looking to save money on their utility bills.
Yeah, it's a very elegant solution because it doesn't ask government for any more money. It saves government money. It saves households money. So let me ask you, is there a downside? Is there any harm? Like we have these permits in place for a reason, right? Is there any harm to streamlining this?
I think it's actually the opposite. The reason that the building codes exist is really sort of around safety issues. It's to make sure that homes are being built safely, that homes are being renovated safely. And automated permitting can actually do a better job at ensuring that home solar is installed safely than traditional sort of manual plan review, because the building code is complicated. And building inspectors, some of them are well trained, others of them are not. In many states, building inspectors don't even have to go through a licensing procedure. And with software, it will ensure that it does all the checks the same way every time. And we think that is a really exciting part of it as well, that we can actually deliver higher safety standards.
Very interesting. So, what is it about the United States that we have all these soft costs? What is the difference between us and Australia? Why doesn't Australia do all this? Is it something in the kind of national zeitgeist? How did we get ourselves here?
I think the US is sort of unique in many ways. And one of the ways that it's unique is that it has lots and lots of local governments, it has lots of utilities, and they all basically operate as their own little empire. And we have not done a very good job of really thinking, okay, what is important for local governments to really have decision making authority over? And what is it actually not that important? And the costs of all that fragmentation when each local government, each utility comes up with its own rules and its own processes, where are those costs far greater than any benefit you might have? So the way I think about it, and I'm sure other people will land in a different place, it probably makes sense for your local government to choose where the parks should be and what the programming should be in the parks and whether to put in a tennis court or a pickleball court. I know those can be very tense discussions. But does it make sense for every local government to come up with its own interpretation of building codes? Does it make sense for every fire marshal to come up with their own interpretation of the fire portions of the building codes? Is it really that different, one town over from the other, about how we should be thinking about building safety? I don't think it is. And the cost of doing that is that you have this incredible patchwork and this incredible complexity that anybody who does any work in and around people's homes have to navigate. And it sort of forces this all to be a sort of very artisanal process rather than an industrial process. So one of the analogies that I like to think about is, imagine if GE had 20,000 different rules for its washing machines, and it had to create basically the same, but like slightly 20,000 slightly different versions of its washing machine. And each washing machine would cost like $20,000. And like we'd all still be down at the river with those boards doing the scrubbing thing. And fortunately, we have one set of product standards around the country, and can produce one washing machine for the whole country. And I think we need to sort of be move into that type of direction with things like home solar and batteries, but also generally home renovation more broadly, home building more broadly, kind of expanding the scope. There's a really interesting paper which either has just come out or is about to come out, which shows that in other countries, they've been much more successful at industrializing housing construction than we have in the United States because they have a standard set of building codes that are
Mm.
uniformly applied across their country. And in the US, we haven't been able to do that. And so I think we see ourselves as doing something which we think is really important around helping lower the price of home solar and batteries and helping Americans save money on their utility bills. But I think there is a sort of a broader movement part of this where we can, I think, in this moment, think about some of the structures that we've had in place and whether there's an opportunity to rethink the costs and benefits of those.
Yeah, the US sounds a bit like a college case study in inefficiency that needs to be addressed.
It's remarkable. I think in this case it is. And in other things, we're like by far and away the most efficient place in the world. It's really like with so many things, there are these real contrasts. And I think we can do a really good thing by just getting rid of some of this red tape that is holding people back from saving money on their utility bills.
One of the things that I think of when I hear you talk about this is, we're hearing a lot of people talk about the abundance agenda right now. Ezra Klein, the podcaster from the New York Times, I think he's the one who kind of got the discussion going, and it's becoming kind of a rallying cry. In some ways, this dovetails nicely with that abundance agenda because it's a way to create more. That's what you're ultimately doing. You're saying if we reduce these soft costs, we can create more solar.
I think the work that we do rhymes with abundance. Abundance, I think, means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And fundamentally, the idea that we shouldn't have rules which cost people a lot of money but don't provide a lot of benefits, I think is probably a political idea which is as old as time, which has got a little bit of a rebranding recently.
Yes.
But we think we're doing something that is pretty basic and that people have been doing for a long time. And just people haven't really focused on it in this particular instance. And if we can bring their attention to the rules that are holding back Americans from putting solar on their home, I think that gives the opportunity for decision makers, politicians, electeds, others to do something about it.
There'll be a lot of solar installers listening to this, a lot of people in the distributed energy space, developers. What would you suggest they do? What can they do on their part to help reduce these soft costs or help educate government about the need to do this?
We'd love to talk to them if they're interested in that, where there's a good chance that we're going to be doing work in their state. We would love to get their stories about the challenges that they've faced, getting permits, getting interconnected. Those anecdotes are just incredibly important to helping people who don't think about this every day understand the kind of the challenge. So, for instance, in New York, we're doing advocacy work there. And there was a solar installer who reached out. He told us about a time when he was trying to get permits in a particular town. And they were so slow at issuing the permits that he literally staged a sit-in in the mayor's office of a small town and said that he wasn't going to leave the mayor's office until he got the goddamn permits for his customers. And the mayor called the cops and the cops escorted him out without any permits. And so stuff like that, those sort of stories, you can't replicate those in the nerdy reports that we write. And so it's really helpful for us to be able to just talk to the people who are doing this every day on the ground and get their experiences. And then I think from a solar installer perspective, we also want to know what are the challenges that they're facing, not just to be able to tell their stories, but so that we can try and fix them. And that's also incredibly helpful.
Fantastic. This has been such an interesting discussion. Your work is noble. Thank you for doing it.
I really appreciate you having me on the show. I really enjoy listening and reading and hope together we can bring down some of these outrageously high rooftop solar costs. So that'll be exciting.
Wonderful. Thank you for joining us today on the Energy Changemakers podcast. I hope today's conversation has inspired you to think differently about the role of distributed energy in our society. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform and consider leaving us a review. You can help us shape the dialogue around energy. Go to energychangemakers.com, subscribe to our newsletter, and join our community. Together, we can make a real difference in how quickly we can make our grid local, equitable, and clean.